can read that. That much I can read.
Okay, and Chair Keller, are you ready to go live? We're at 1 o'clock.
Yes, I am.
Okay. We are live.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's CSBARS meeting. This time I ask that roll be called to establish a quorum.
Linda Keller.
Present.
Michael Clancy.
Present.
James Efting.
Present.
George Leal.
Present.
Kevin Marshall.
Present.
Jessica Park.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you. We now open the floor for public comment. Just as a reminder, all public comments are limited to 2 minutes. You may raise your hand via Zoom using the raise hand feature. If you are on the phone, you can raise and lower hand using *9. Wanted to note that CSBAR has received 1 public comment. I believe 1 person has signed up for public comment today. I don't know if they are yet in attendance.
That's correct, and I do believe they have arrived. So Vivian, if you would recognize Todd Hill to make a public comment of up to 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Todd Hill. I had some interesting issues getting on the meeting today. Seems like the invitation from yesterday, the link expired, strangely enough. But luckily I was here in time. As all of you are aware, I have a pending case in Western District Court that I had to file, unfortunately, because my school, which defrauded me, was put on probation December of 2022. Probation generally means that an offending individual or entity has actually passed through some period of actual detention or castigation. But here, that's not the case. Here, what has happened is that the school is simply allowed to perform. The school need not be in compliance ever, apparently. As the bar has diligently recorded, even in its probation, it has not spent 1 day in actual compliance. So the reality is that it's still being simply assisted in its non-compliance and the efforts that are here to demonstrate that theoretically you guys are there to actually protect people. I received a note from the new administration, but apparently that note was an error. It was talking about how they were having classes that they were going to commence. Again, they haven't applied for a new it boggles the mind, just boggles the mind. I will be filing an updated amended complaint, and I'll be filing again my public comment in writing. Hopefully it appears somewhere, as I've asked in the past for my public comment to be actually published somewhere. The State Bar really simply just makes it disappear because there is no public repository. And so how would the public know that document exists? So clearly the intention is simply to bury it. I think duty would demand otherwise. I think your duties demand otherwise under section 6001.1. I think just as people, your duties demand otherwise.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Please wrap up your comment.
I did. Thank you for the time.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else for public comment today?
No other hands raised at this time. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move to the approval of the minutes of our April 19th, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? And please identify yourself when you respond.
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Dean Marshall. Are there any comments or edits for the minutes?
Then we need also a second, please.
Okay, sorry, I was going to do discussion first. Do we have a second for the motion?
This is Michael Clancy. I second the motion.
Thank you. Okay, any discussion of the minutes from our last meeting? Okay, then let's move to the vote, please.
Michael Clancy,
Aye.
James Efting,
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't there.
George Leal,
My apologies. Aye.
Kevin Marshall,
Aye.
Jessica Park,
Aye.
Linda Keller.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Okay. Thank you. For the chair's report, I just wanted to note that we have a couple of special site items within our staff reports. One around 1:15, or perhaps we can move to that earlier, since I see that both Amy Nunez and Donna Hershkowitz are here for their discussion items, and our public trust liaison item, I believe we are planning for 2:15. So just wanted to mention that. With that, we can move on to staff reports, please.
Thank you. Dean Keller, would you like to begin with the rules items since Amy and Donna are present? And then we'll return to the blue ribbon.
Yes, that sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome, Amy. Welcome, Donna.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I apologize for the background noise. I'm in a open setting at the moment. But one of the items that should be placed on the screen right now is the rules timeline. I want to highlight here all of the various rules that we are currently reviewing for potential proposed changes. As you can see here, these are the various rules that we are looking at and exploring in the Office of Admissions. I think we talked about the fact that we've looked at our processes and our rules. We're trying to address anything that has created a potential barrier for applicants, any corrections, any improvements that we can make to the rules in general. And what you have before you is the timeline from when we first started on this task in 2022 through 2024. We're looking at different rules. We have moral character, we have the PTLS, LOS programs, the testing accommodations, eligibility. The ones that might be of interest to everybody on this call is the registered law school rules, as well as the eligibility rules. So we are looking at those rules as a way of improving the operations process altogether. And so where we're at right now, as you can see on this calendar, this timeline displays the path or the course that these rules are going through. So staff bring these rules to the CBE meeting, looking for CBE volunteers to help us review the rules, to come back and bring a proposal for the committee to agree on and to approve before we send it out for public comment. The item then once the committee approves the draft rule proposal, we bring it to the board with a request for public comment. When that item returns from public comment, it returns to the CBE, and the CBE and staff work on incorporating those comments if necessary, or on producing the final draft that goes to the board for approval. And that's that last column that you see on the right. So as I noted, the rules that might be of interest to this group are the rules related to the registered law school. And as you can see here on page 2, if we can move to that, our proposal is to potentially have to be able to circulate a draft in August of 2023 to the CBE. Eligibility rules are also going to be included in the rules proposal that the CBE will see in August. Potentially, we've also added the rules to the October 2023 CBE meeting in the event that the registered law schools are not ready. This is based on our experience with the accredited law school rules, that it took multiple iterations before everybody was comfortable with presenting something to the Board of Trustees. One item that you can see here too is the Board of Trustees meetings are highlighted in yellow. And that's because those are the meetings that we could actually bring these items to the board. The board only considers rules in November and May meetings. And so the idea here would be to bring the registered law schools, potentially those rules, to the board. If not in November of 2023, then it would happen in 2024, along with eligibility. And so, you know, this, again, it lists other rules here that may not be that relevant to this group, but it gives you a sense of all of the rule considerations that the Office of Admissions is looking at the moment. So with that, are there any questions?
Yes, I see Dean Park with a question. Go ahead.
Thank you. I did get to take a look at that timeline and just did have that question. So you mentioned that board meetings are in May and November. So this timeline goes as far as March, I think, of 2024. But if it did go to May, then that's a potential row where the registered law school rules would show up in relation to a board meeting. Is that right?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, because that was actually one of my questions, like where it would appear in a Board of Trustees row. So I appreciate that. And my other question is, you know, and I'm really thinking about this from, of course, the registered law school dean side, you know, completely in agreement, similar to the accredited law schools. There would be that appreciation for enough time for discussion among those law schools about what they are reviewing. If this is scheduled for August, by when would those who are going to review or comment receive a copy? Does that need to be a time before August, or is it August that's when it's actually being distributed for viewing? I just want to get clarity on that.
So the goal is to have, you know, the working group, or maybe it's all of CSBARS, participate in the rules draft. So whatever will come to the CBE, I imagine will come to your group first. But, and so I think Natalie could weigh in a little bit more on that.
Sure. Yeah. So it's intended to be placed out with the August postings. So it would be that 5 to 10 days period. If possible, to bring sections out to CSBARS previously, we may do that. But otherwise, it would be standard posting.
Thank you. And then in terms of public comment or other processes, it's ongoing. If, for example, a dean has suggestions or, you know, things like that, it would be sent to law school regulation.
That's correct. So consistent with the announcements we've been making since January, comments are helpful at every stage, but they are the most helpful if they are received at this preliminary point so that they are incorporated into the framework. And so we'd greatly encourage people to send them in up front. If they're concerned that their comment could change upon seeing the draft, they can simply send an amendment. So yes, greatly encouraged.
Thank
And
you.
that is the correct address, law school regulation at calbar.ca.gov, or they may also use the CSBARS at calbar.ca.gov.
Thank you.
That's the public comment address that's noted on the agenda for today.
Okay, thank you. Dean Liao, you are up next.
Oh, thank you. I have a suggestion and a question. On the suggestion, to follow up with what Dean Park just asked about, I'd like to have this issue of the initial draft review of the registered rules on the CSBARS agenda for August. And if it was submitted to the membership, I would very much appreciate the opportunity to forward it to a number of the schools who generally don't participate or appear at the CSBAR meetings. And encourage them to review the initial draft, and then if they have questions or comments, to be able to make a comment period at the August meeting. And so I think we'd all agree it's a meaningless act to make a public comment about something you haven't seen. So to the extent that it's an agenda item, and then we would have access to the initial draft, hopefully a week or 10 days before the meeting, I think we would, the likelihood of increased buy-in, increased discussion, review by the key stakeholders, I think would go up remarkably. So if you could make that happen, I think it would be in everyone's best interest. My second is a question, and Amy, it relates to the issue of the eligibility rules, and that's something I always am quite concerned about every time we send in certificates for either my first year students or our graduates. What is the I don't know if we've had much of a discussion. What's being planned for a change or review or revision to the eligibility rules?
I think we're looking at the rules for improving on the clarity. I think, for example, there's focus on the foreign educated area, so that we provide more clarity. We've been getting a lot of questions in around the same area in the foreign educated category of rules. I'm trying to think of something else within eligibility. Audrey, do you have?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So part of what Amy's saying is completely correct. Like, some of it is clarity and cleanup with our rules. So now that everything's submitted through the applicant portal, making more references to that in the rules versus, mailing documents into the state bar, just sort of updating, making sure that we scan everything in the rules related to eligibility for any barriers that might exist. And we've also gone back and looked at CBE meetings, prior CBE meetings where there have been discussions about eligibility rules, and maybe something hasn't moved forward. Something that comes to mind about that is like refugee status. So someone, in terms of, refugee status and military service, or different areas that the CBE had talked about in prior years about how that might affect someone's documentation if they're a refugee. So making some carve outs about refugee status for eligibility. And then like if someone has active military duty, how do we pause their number of attempts on the first year exam? So things like that, where we're trying to look kind of like a little bit backward looking to make sure we haven't lost a thread in time through CBE discussions in the past. And is it time to come and bring those forward again to CBE to get some action? And then things related to clarity, like Amy said, some issues, just making sure that we're covering and up to date on all the, the way we're doing process with foreign educated. But yeah, we've talked about it, about some of the high level changes we're going to have at CBE meetings. The last one, I guess it was in March. And then, in August, there'll be the full package. But you could look back at if you look at the March meeting, there's a lot on there with the suggested changes.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Leonard, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. And then also one thing I would say to address Dean Leal's initial comment about advising the registered schools, we generally do try to make notice as widely as possible to everyone, including the deans of the registered law school community. We would also look to you to encourage schools to participate by having an engagement forum like this. The State Bar is telegraphing its interest and putting its time and resources behind engagement. And this is one of the most interactive engagement fora we have. So to the extent that the registered schools or any member of the public are interested, we would encourage them to submit the public comments, either written or live, to this forum and participate. So definitely would appreciate your help with that and support of this as an exchange mechanism, if it's something you appreciate too.
Well, I'll just speak out. I do thank you, Natalie, and that would be my intent, as we have I've done along with Dean Clancy and Dean Park, getting other schools, at least aware of. I mean, often, as you know, they're pretty busy and they don't really focus in on what the CSBARS is doing. Again, if they see something in writing, it gets their attention in terms of these are the rules that we're going to have to live with, and that I think motivates them more than anything else to attend and even perhaps submit written or at least oral public comments. So to the extent that we can have something to discuss among ourselves, then I think just increases the likelihood of getting that kind of input and transparency.
Thanks.
All right, great, thank you. All right. Any other questions with regard to this item, or Amy, did you want to add anything else? Okay.
No, that's it. Sorry about that, Dean. Yes, I've highlighted everything I wanted to.
Excellent, thank you. I just couldn't tell whether you had unmuted or to speak or not. Thank you so much for your time. Then let's move on to item C, the report on the status of proposed admissions fee amendments.
Okay.
You want me to? Oh, I was going to say I can share. You got it.
I got it. Thank you for letting me join you today. I wanted to take the opportunity to circle back with you all on the status of the proposed increases to all of the fees that we charge to support the programs and services that are offered through the Office of Admissions. Obviously, we had a conversation with you back at your April meeting, I believe it was. We circulated 2 options for public comment. And then we received direction from the Board of Trustees on how to proceed. And so that's what I want to circle back with you on. You are getting sort of a preview of this presentation. The same presentation or a similar presentation will be made to the Committee of Bar Examiners on Friday. But I just wanted to start, and I know I haven't moved the first slide yet, that's intentional. I just wanted to start with a quick reminder of why we're proposing fee increases in the first place. As we look back, we've realized that most of our fees have not increased for more than 5 years. While costs, as you all know, costs to operate our office and to offer all the programs and services, such as the bar exam, have increased. Some have increased significantly. The end result is that we are left with a structural deficit in the admissions fund that simply is not able to continue much longer. The current budget for 2023 projects a $7 million difference between the anticipated revenue and the budgeted expenses, i.e. 7 million more in expenses than in revenue. So at the end of this calendar year, at the end of 2023, after spending 7 million more out of our 7 million more than we're anticipated to receive in revenue, the remaining fund balance at the end of 2023 is slated to be $4 million. Right. So in other words, without a combination of fee increases and cost reduction, the fund is not sufficiently solvent to be able to support operations through the entirety of 2024. So we really are at a a bit of a crisis point where we have to look at fee increases and we have to look at operational changes in order to be able to continue to provide the services that we've been providing. So now moving on. As you'll recall, the bar had developed 2 options for that applied for increasing most of the fees. The first option was the break-even approach. It was designed to ensure that the revenue that was received was sufficient to meet the operational costs of running the program. The second option was more modest. It, in most instances, capped the fee increases for non-attorneys or students at 10%, whereas it was not as cautious with the fee increases for the attorney population, those who are assumed to be in a better position to absorb the fee increases than the students. Despite the virtues of option 2 and the goals behind it and the intent of on not pricing students and non-attorneys out of some of these programs, it resulted in us still having a $4.5 million deficit in the admissions fund. So presented with the facts and the figures as well as the themes from the public comment that we received, and we had about 500 public commenters. The Board of Trustees in the end was guided by its fiduciary obligations to the bar and its and the financial realities. And so the board directed at their May meeting staff to follow up with an approach that largely adopted the option that resulted in full cost recovery, that first break-even option, but wanting that the staff proposal to provide for some limited exceptions. But they were really focused on and said very clearly, we have to be able, we can't keep funding this. Overall, the revenue and the expenditures need to match. We don't have a fund balance to continue to take from, and we're going to have to be able to make up that difference between fees and cost increases, cost reductions, I'm sorry. And so following the presentation today, as I mentioned, we're going to go to CBE on Friday. And then the plan is to take this new set of proposed fee increases, things that were close to option 1, but with some exceptions, out for another 30-day public comment. And then we would take the proposal to the board, our Board of Trustees in September. So they've got the benefit of your comments today, the benefit of the public comment this period, as well as the 30-day period before. And the intent is that the fee would generally take effect for at the start of 2024. Right, so we've sort of projected these fees for needing increased revenue for 2024. So for increases to law school fees, for example, law school regulation fees, those would take effect January 1 of 2024, is the intent there. The challenge is with the bar exam, frankly, because in order for these fees to be effective for the full year, for the February bar exam, we actually need to make the fees effective with the opening of registration, which is October 1st. And so what our plan is that we would be doing some very broad public notice when we go out for public comment. We will also post on our website. We will send direct emails to those in our system who look likely to be ready to take the exam in February 2024 and July 2024, and let folks know we've posted this item for public comment. The fee was developed based on the input from the Board of Trustees and the direction that the Board of Trustees told us to move in. As a result, you should expect the fee that for the February exam to look very much like this fee that we are proposing here. The board will obviously be guided by public comment, but really wanting to give folks notice in July that the fee for the February exam is going to be increased because the registration for that exam opens October 1. And so we want to make sure that they've got notice now and don't just have notice after the board makes its decision in late September for October 1, because we know some people may be saving money in order to be able to register for the exam. So this slide and the following two slides show you what the current proposal is. It's the column entitled the proposed new fee. And I've also included for reference what the prior option 1 and prior option 2 are that were circulated for public comment and that you all had previously seen. I've put in bold, so it stands out just a little bit, the current fee and the proposed new fee, as well as the lines that are identifying a student or non-attorney increase. So I'm not planning to go through all of these fees one by one, but generally what you'll see is for the students or non-attorneys is that the increase is higher than was originally proposed with option 2 in order to carry out the board's direction that we break even. But we didn't take it as high as option 1. We really were doing the calculations to try and get as close to break even as possible. So for example, the proposal the proposal that was put out for public comment, the two options, raised the non-attorney fee for the bar exam from $677, the current fee, to either $745 or $878, depending on which option. This version, in the proposed new fee column, shows the fee at $850, so less than option 1, but higher than the proposed option, the previously proposed option 2. Similarly, for the first year exam, the previously circulated options increased the fee from the current fee of $624 to a fee of either $685 or the break-even fee of $1,850. This proposal raises it to $850, which is the same cost as the bar exam. So certainly higher than the $685 that was proposed for option 2, but considerably less than the $1,850 that was proposed for option 1. The MJP fees went out just with a single option. These were some of the fees where the feeling was that the people who were applying had a greater ability to absorb some of the increases. And so it really was a break-even option. There was no option 2 here, and that remains unchanged in this current proposal that will be circulating for public comment. And maybe what you've all been waiting for is here you see the proposed revisions to the law school fees for the annual report and the inspections. In public comments, we heard from the schools indicating that they would need to pass any of these increases onto the students in order for the school to be able to handle these increases. So I do have a column here on this slide where we looked at each school's tuition and fees, and we looked at their enrollment numbers as reported in the 2022 annual reports to get a sense of what the per student impact would be if the entirety of the increase did have to be passed on to the students, because we thought that might be sort of a helpful way to take a look at this. Starting with the CALs, you'll see at the top that the current proposal adopts the high $22,900 option 1 for the annual report. And I mean, trust me, I want to sort of, we understand, we recognize that when you look at that, that is a very shocking number. It is obviously a significant increase. What we did was looking at at both the increase in the report fees as well as the inspection fee, what you'll see here is that on average, that shockingly high number, on average, it nets out to just a little over $260 annually per student. And that average is artificially high. Obviously, it depends on the number of students enrolled. And so if you have a school or two with very few students in, their cost per student is significantly higher. So again, it's on average $260 per student each year for both the inspection fee and the report increases. But though that's the average amount for 8 of the CALs, the total is actually less than $100 per student. And for another 4 of the CALs, it's still lower than that average $260. Again, the impact is obviously greater on those schools with smaller enrollment. As to the registered schools, you'll see that the proposal moves a lot closer to option 1, but unlike for the CALs, doesn't quite adopt option 1, but moves significantly closer than what had previously been proposed in option 2. The result here again is an average per student impact of just under $300 a year. And with the exception of 2 schools, if the increases are passed along to the students, that the increase represents less than 1%, a 1% increase in tuition and fees. And for some, it's significantly less than 1%. So I wanted to take the opportunity to go over these in a little detail because of the direct impact, obviously, on all of you. And then the end result, right, is expenditures are still going to exceed revenue by more than $1 million. And there are a lot of unknowns, obviously, in the math here, to the extent that we have schools that end up being dually accredited or jointly accredited. There will be fewer inspection fees. The revenue will the difference between the revenue and the expenditures will grow with a variety of factors. There are, we are looking at counts of for the bar exam fees, for example, we're looking at counts from 2022 for the budgeted expenditures. We're looking at the 2023 budget, but we have adjusted that to remove anything that's one time or reinsert anything that was taken out of this year's budget, but that is absolutely needed for ongoing operations. But right now it's netting out to about 1 million still of expenditures exceeding revenues. And so as a result, part and parcel and concurrent with this exploration of the fees, we've been looking at our expenditures. And since the largest expenditure in our budget by far is the bar exam, this was the obvious place to try and find savings. And so I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Amy Nunez to talk a little bit more about the cost reduction models that we've been looking at. And then Dean Keller, you can tell me, actually, before we do that, do you want to take questions on the fees, or do you want to go through the cost reduction models and then take questions on all of it?
Let's go ahead and do the fees while it's still fresh in folks' mind. And yeah, if you can go back to that slide, that's perfect. Thank you. So questions or comments from the committee members? Yes, Dean Park.
I did want to ask, so I saw inspection A, B, C under the registered unaccredited law schools. And where the ABC was mentioned above, it was, very much student size related, and it's smaller student sizes, which I think does make sense for the category. But I was just curious what inspection ABC meant, because they all had the same parenthetical. Are those supposed to correlate to the student body size? Really? Okay.
Yeah, it does. And that's a good note, Dean Park, to make sure when we send this out for public comment, we're clear. Yeah, it's distinguishing between the annual report for schools of size A, size B, and size C. And then below that, the increases for the inspection costs for schools of size A, size B, and size C. So that the categorization of school size does not change.
Oh, okay, great.
And there are not currently any schools in category C, any registered schools in category C. There is one school in category A, everything else is in category B.
Oh, okay. That's helpful. And then in terms of the professional services hourly, I mean, I remember that before saying, so my question about that is sort of the delineation between, what's part of inspection and what's part of the professional services. Is there sort of a consistent delineation sort of between what's covered by the fee versus what's additional?
Yeah, so my understanding, it was that this line of the professional services hourly was taking into account revenue that was received as a result of hourly charges to the schools for the consultants sort of outside of the inspection. But this was other hourly charges that were, I believe, that were received. Natalie, if I've got that wrong, maybe you can correct me on that piece.
Yeah, that's the case. So historically, the fee for the inspection for the unaccredited law schools is a flat fee. And then that professional services, that's for additional consulting, that's for motions like major changes, change of headquarters, things like that, the way that it's been seen in the past as well. In contrast, the accredited law school inspections are ultimately calculated on an hourly rate, and this is an estimate, and then they're trued up at the end of that.
Oh, okay. So the professional services hourly, it doesn't apply to both law school categories.
It does. It applies to both law school categories. So any sort of ad hoc consulting that the school might request regarding brainstorming about a future change, any type of motions that are written, those sorts of things, just the way that it always has been. And then it's invoiced in conjunction with that project.
Yeah, so these are major changes and things like that are separate and apart from the inspection or the annual report.
Right.
I think my comment visually to that is, if that's not just one category, it might be more clear if it's put in a more universal row. That's just something, because I don't know if I would have picked that up from here. I think people who have worked on these more would know with prior experience, but someone who might be coming more fresh to this. And then I think, I hear on fees not having shifted for a while. I mean, ALU has been around since 1996. So, to some extent we have witnessed, fees and consistency. I just think for public comment, it might really come down to what annual fees people typically budget for per entity. And we have consistently budgeted around a certain amount. Of course, when we take this to management, we always discuss it, but there are other models. So it might just kind of be, it might be a lot to explain the increase when, it's not coming necessarily from another formula to have fees like that we might see at other entities. So that's what I would foresee potentially being in comment. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dean Marshall.
I'm sorry if this was stated, but what is the target date? Kind of along the lines for budgeting, but what is the target date or effective date for implementation of these new fees?
Yeah, I did mention it, but I think it is something that's important. Let me take this off my screen. Something that is important to mention again, which is the goal generally for all of these fees is January 1, 2024 implementation date. And so if you don't pay I should know this, but I'm assuming you pay the annual report fee probably in November or so when you submit the annual report, in which case you wouldn't be paying that until November 2024.
Okay, so we'd have a year to work this into our budget.
Right, exactly.
Whatever it is. Okay.
Unless your budget year starts July 1, as many schools do. And then you've got to be figuring it out differently. But just going back to Dean Park's comment, just visually, we've got CALS inspections and asterisks, and then there's an asterisk at the bottom, but there's also an asterisk before professional services. So that's just a little confusing, like what is supposed to be connected to what there.
Yes, good catch. Thank you. I took the tables that were circulated previously for public comment, and I added things and clearly missed a couple of things, including that there's nothing that relates to that reference about the original asterisk there under the CALS inspection or the professional services. So I will absolutely clean this up before it goes out for public comment.
Okay. Thank you. And just, I'm thinking back to some of the public comment raised before with CSBARS. So, I think from the small schools, it's all, as you pointed out, sure, 260 might to us not seem like much per student, but to our students, it will. And into smaller schools, it will be significantly higher. So that's going to be very difficult for them to pass on those fees, which may end up being, as much, if not more, than what they're paying, per unit for tuition. So just to bring that back to mind. And there was also prior public comment from another dean that had mentioned that there's different sizes factored in with regard to one type of school, but not the other. I don't know if there's some history there or explanation, but that might be helpful to know what the thinking is there on that distinction.
And that is historical, and that's the way that we've. And I think it's because there tends to be, or has in the past tended to be, some wide variations in size of the registered schools, with some just having a handful in the past, and some having a significantly greater size. And so this is something that is historical. We didn't adopt it for this exercise. It's something that's been in place for quite some time.
Yeah, it's somewhat of a vestige. So when the unaccredited schools came over from the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education, the unaccredited schools were in a tier structure. And so though the State Bar had not ever used a tier structure for the accredited schools, they adopted that rubric.
Okay. Dean Liao.
Yeah, hi, I have a question about the parenthetical in the inspection fees. I mean, in the CALS, I know they've been doing this for quite some time, paying it forward in advance. And so it looks like they would have an $8,000 annual fee headed paying in advance for their upcoming inspections. You've got the same parenthetical for the registered schools, for instance, inspection B. It's 1/5 of a 5-year flat fee. So it seems ambiguous or confusing that the flat fee is $6,000. So are you saying that then like the CALS registered schools would start paying in advance for their inspection fee? Or Or is this a stealth way of saying that we would now have a $30,000 inspection fee that is $6,000 times 5?
So part of this is just looking at the reality of the time that's been spent on the registered inspections, and we're finding that they're taking as long or longer than some of the CALS inspections in some cases. And finance looked at some of the actual cost data.
Well, no, of course, I get, but I'm just saying, for our planning purposes, the same parentheticals there, 1/5 of 5-year flat fee. So are we dividing annually 6,000 by 5 and paying that?
No, I think the annual amount, Natalie, correct me, is using that B category, the annual amount that's the estimated amount that's paid annually is that 1,800 amount. With the
That's listed as the current fee, but so you're saying,
right.
I would need to double check. I believe that current fee is the base annual fee, and then the proposed new fee would be an annual fee adding toward the inspection.
Yeah, so it would go up. So the annual estimate of 1,800 would go up to 6,000.
A little.
but that means it's a 30,000. So in a 5-year inspection period, that's a $30,000 fee. That's what I'm trying to clarify. It says, again, I'm just trying to read what's on the screen. You've got a proposed fee of $6,000. Okay, that's not the total estimated fee for a registered schools inspection. That's the proposed fee that they would pay annually toward a future inspection.
Right,
So
and these fees, these inspection fees that you're seeing, that these are in the current fee for the inspection area. That's a 1/5 of what the school is paying now, and then the new fee is 1/5 what the schools would pay in the future.
So our future expectation is that for a registered school of fewer than 200 students, we would likely see a fee of $30,000. If you multiply 6,000 times 5, I think my math is right. Is that just so because that's higher than the 22,000. Well, no, I guess the CALS are.
No, CALS are paying 8,000 times 5. So the estimate is that it's going to cost 40,000 to inspect a CALS and 30,000 to inspect a registered.
So,
if I'm understanding it correctly.
Yes.
I think for purposes of again, I'm confused. I suspect maybe others looking at this are confused. You ought to have either a parenthetical into the proposed new fee that says $30,000 total for an inspection of a Class B registered unaccredited law school.
Yeah, and we were trying to lay out what the annual fee is, but we can certainly we can provide clarification so there isn't confusion.
And so for reference, the current fees, the current fees for the unaccredited inspections are about 6,000, 9,000, and 11,000, depending on the size of the school, prior to this proposal. And then that's reduced to the 1/5 amount for the purposes of this chart.
Well, but again, just look at it from our perspective for just a minute. So you're saying that if these proposals were adopted by the CBE, then a school of my size would be required to pay with the annual report $7,500 instead of the $1,090, and each year pay $6,000 toward a future inspection.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's
and that is why we broke out what the average impact per student would be, assuming that the fees, sort of based on the comments that we had heard, that the fees would need to be passed along to the students, and so we wanted to calculate what that increase would be, and so that's what that. So again, for the registered, we're looking at an average of $176 for the report and per year, and $117 increase for students per year for the inspection. And so that's why we broke it out, because the numbers, we understand the numbers are yes, George, going from 1,800 in a year to 6,000 in a year, or 5 times that for each of those, is a big change. We are not denying that that's a big change.
I know you're not, and I heard that, but on the other hand, just so committee members understand what this kind of impact would be. I mean, again, it's kind of it's apples oranges. I mean, we currently are paying only $1,800 for plus expenses for inspections, and now that's going to go to 30,000. So
no, you're paying 1,800 times 5.
Well, we haven't been. We get billed for the registered schools. I mean, I haven't been inspected since. It's coming up maybe next year, but I mean, that to me seems like a sea change. I've known for years that the CALs have been paying in advance for their inspections. I've, to this moment, been unaware of the fact that, and don't believe we've been paying in advance for our inspections. That like the old days, that schools would get an invoice based upon the number of hours and the like. So maybe Natalie, you can clarify. I mean, is this a proposed change in how registered schools will, going forward, if adopted, will start having to pay in advance for their inspections?
Sure. So right now, the school is billed in the year that they are inspected. It's approximately 6,000, 9,000, or 11,000. Part of the reasoning is to spread the revenue out over evenly to help the school adjust with the budgeting. And another thing you might reference with the management, back at the time when you were here, you'll recall that when the fees were last increased, a discussion in 2017 that rolled out in 2018. At that time, the State Bar accepted a fee profile that did not break even at that time to allow a runway for the schools to be able to plan ahead. And so I think once they remember that there has been, this 17 plus 6, the 6-year runway, to expect that prices would adjust to what a break even could be potentially in the future. I think that may help provide good context for the discussion.
Well, no, I'm in full agreement, and I do remember, it was always a painful phone conversation, even though the dean of a school being a CALS being inspected knew this was going to cost, and then we would send them an invoice of $2,200, $3,000, $4,000, and that's what led to the discussion and then the adoption by the committee of this advanced payment for the CALs. But that I don't believe, and I may be wrong, correct me, that discussion, and I'm not against it. I think it's a good idea. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying this is news to me, and maybe probably news to many of the other registered deans of registered schools. So, and again, on top of that, it's the total amount. I mean, 30,000 is significantly more for all the reasons we've discussed. Obviously, an economic necessity, but it's just this comes as news to many of the smaller registered schools.
Yeah, I did want to comment, I think, and George, thank you for fleshing some of that out. I didn't realize about the runway process, but it is news, and I can see where there's a consideration there, but I just have not seen things in practice, or I haven't seen things posted clearly in writing that I feel I understood this as a registered law school dean. And that's surprising to me, I think, given our school has been through visits. So I think it'll be good when we're clear with the registered law school group that there will be a place that it's clearly in writing for them, and where there's this kind of advance notice of sort of a yearly allotment.
Speaking of the visit fee, I know it was mentioned there'll be fewer inspection fees for CAL schools who are dual accredited, but of course there'll also be fewer inspections, so you won't be incurring the cost of those inspections.
Yeah.
But that raises the question of when can schools that are already accredited by other institutions that meet the jointly accredited standard in the rules that were already adopted have the opportunity to be deemed dually accredited and not have to pay in for inspections that are not going to regularly occur.
So that's something that we're working on right now. And part of that is determining what the full compliance is, including with the new section C. And so what you'll start to see going forward is the evaluation of the material from the annual report last year and this year to determine that, so that process can go forward too.
Okay, and just for clarification, when you say with regard to the new section C, what are you referring to?
Oh, the diversity section, for example, and just generally the new accredited rules during this 2-year phase-in period.
So the rules went into effect, what, January of 2021 and when?
2022.
Sorry, 2022. So, right, so we've had 2022, 2023. So at the beginning of 2024, we can expect to be able to start applying and being deemed jointly accredited, and those schools would then not have to pay into a regular inspection fund when they won't be subject to regular inspections.
Well, that's part of what's being figured out now, and figuring out what the cost profile could be so that the fees for that will be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Dean Clancy.
There we go. There was reference to the difference between the accredited schools and the registered schools with regards to the creation of tiers for payment of the fees. And it was explained that for historical reasons, it was done this way. Is there any consideration that's going to be done regarding the possibility of creating tiers for the accredited schools?
It's not something that we've discussed as part of this exercise, but it's certainly a discussion that I don't see any reason why we couldn't have the discussion. And the discussion could end up being eliminating tiers for everybody or creating tiers for everybody. But it's certainly, I see no reason why we couldn't start engaging in that discussion.
All right, it seems to me that just to make it balanced, that it ought to be applied for both categories. And I say that as someone who is at the head of a school that has a larger population of students. So I know that it would affect my school adversely, but I'm thinking about fairness in this regard, and for that reason mentioned it.
Appreciate it. Dean Leal?
Thank you. Yeah, getting back to just the work that was done to come up with these estimates, and with the baseline understanding that it was intended to, match the expense with the revenue that this particular regulatory action cost. And the math's pretty simple. I just divided 30,000 by the new hourly rate of $350. That's 85 hours, roughly 86 hours of time that would be allocated or paid for an inspection visit. And I'm not about to dispute that, but I guess the question is, in coming up with the figures, and I know that now virtually all the registered schools are handled by consultants, and you can do the math there, what the consultants' fees are, and to find out what the average number of hours for a registered school's inspection are. If it's at around 80 to 90 hours, and that fee, I would agree, makes a lot of sense. If it's below that, then there's some question of whether or not, again, that particular fee would be subsidizing other aspects of the admissions overhead. Or on the other hand, if it turns out that the average is higher, then I could see someone asking, why isn't it that figure even higher than proposed? So I don't know if that kind of analysis was done in terms of coming up with the $30,000 figure that appears to have been decided upon for the inspection B of a registered school.
So really the analysis that was done to come up with the current proposal that you see before you really was an exercise in following the direction of the board to get closer to break even, or as close to break even as possible, looking at what had been previously circulated for option 1 and option 2. And as the board sort of talked about it as mostly option 1, but some things that are less than option 1 were necessary, and they called it sort of for ease of reference option 1.5. I'm reluctant to use that term because it makes it sound like it's supposed to be in the middle, and that was not the intent. so that was the exercise, frankly. Dean Leal was going through and looking at for various amounts from between option 1 and option 2, what the per student impact would be for the different school types, and having a feeling for what it is that we could do that would meet the goal of meeting our fiscal realities, as well as trying to limit to the extent possible the burden on the students. Those are very difficult goals to meet, both of them.
Yes. Okay, if there are no other questions, then I think we can thank you for being here. And maybe before our 2:15, we'll have time for Audrey to cover the Blue Ribbon Commission report.
We have some slides here that Amy's going to present on the cost models.
I'm sorry, thank you.
We can go, Amy's still here, right? She can go.
Yes,
through
I'm here.
High
Can you hear me?
level pretty quickly. And Donna, if you need to go, because I know you only had till 2, I can share the slides too.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, if you want to stop sharing, I can share from there.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So what I am going to cover is the bar exam and cost reductions in that area. Donna highlighted this in part of her presentation, and that is the fact that the bar exam is our single largest expenditure in the Office of Admissions. Our experience with administering a remote exam has lent itself well to what we're doing now. We know that there are more efficient ways of delivering this exam. One of our factors that's guiding all the exploration is ensuring that we're considering the impact that some of these changes will have on our applicants, especially those applicants with testing accommodation. So we're trying to make sure that we preserve their experience, and also that we are successful at providing the appropriate accommodation. And also after each of our remote exams, we conducted surveys with the examinees, and we're applying some of this information, specifically that there is a preference for applicants to have the exam administered remotely rather than in person. So let me, we can go to the next slide. Let me talk about the cost reduction focused on the areas that are the most expensive for the bar exam, and that is facilities and proctor needs. And so here the idea is to consolidate the administration into fewer sites. And we have, I'll explain each of the models where we attempt to do that. Also, that the essays and the performance tests are delivered remotely. We are obligated to administer the MBE in person based on the National Conference of Law Examiners requirements. And also, we're exploring the use of state bar offices for our testing accommodation applicants. Audrey, can we go to the next screen, please? So what I'll cover here are each of the models that we're exploring. So the model that we're comparing against is how we administer the exam today. Today, that exam, the bar exam is administered all in person, the essays, the PT, and the multiple choice section, the MBE. We have multiple test sites across the state, and roughly that costs us about $5.6 million a year. So that is the total cost. And this does not include staff time. And also here, the assumption is that it's roughly almost 1,100 applicants that we administer the exam for. One of the things that's affecting our budget too is that there's been a decline in the number of applicants, which results in a decline in the revenue. So that's one of the things that we've also factored into each of these models. The next model here is called, labeled as 6 sites. the idea here is to reduce the number of sites to 6 across California. All of the components, again, would be administered in person as they are today. The 6 sites include 3 TA sites and 3 standard sites. These standard sites, we're kind of calling them super sites because they would hold about anywhere between 1,100 and 1,600 applicants. The reduction of the number of sites to 6 also eliminates sites in Sacramento, in Oakland, and in San Diego. It brings most applicants to either Northern California or Southern California. So in the Bay Area and then around Los Angeles. Just simply by reducing the number of sites, our estimated annual savings is about $855,000. We would keep the same number of proctors, and this is just really ultimately a reduction of the number of sites. We're also exploring the idea of using remote testing for the California portion of the exam, that is for the essays and the PT. So in this next model, the idea is to use the 6 sites that I've just highlighted previously. We would administer the MBE at those 6 sites. And then the essays and the PT would be administered remotely. We would be using some of the same sites that I've noted in the previous model. And again, with the same implications that we had no sites in Sacramento, Oakland, or San Diego. We would also host applicants that have accommodations that are not, they're not able to accommodate in a remote environment. For example, anybody who needs hard copy material or to dictate to a typist, or whatever the case may be, we would be providing testing facility for those applicants. So when you apply the 6 sites and the 1-day remote, the annual savings is about $1.5 million. This 4th model here is has an added feature, and that is it would limit the sites to 4. So we would have 3 standard sites, and these are the super sites that I mentioned in the previous models, and 1 TA site for the overflow of applicants, because the idea would be to use the state bar offices, the one in Los Angeles and one in San Francisco, for our testing accommodation applicants. Again, this is an MBE that's administered in person, and the essays and the PT administered remotely. And adding the state bar offices for their use, the annual savings is about $1.8 million. One thing that I want to be clear is that all these models are being explored with regard to the impact on the population with testing accommodations. We're really working hard to address those needs. And I also want to highlight that all of these models will not allow us to recover all of our costs, but it's clear that we definitely need to make an effort to reduce our expenditures. And these are just different models that will allow us to do that. Okay, so Dean, you have a question?
Yes, thanks. Just a quick clarification question on that. When you're the ones you're exploring where you would cut down the number of sites and then have 1 remote day, I'm curious, are those still back to back? Because, and I ask that because someone in San Diego now has to not only pay, so now we are doing a financial impact on recent grads. They have to now pay to find somewhere to pay for a hotel the night before their first night, and then the night after. And then they actually have to pay for a hotel for a full day of remote testing and find a hotel that is going to be quiet enough and have reliable enough Wi-Fi that they can do remote testing there. So obviously, if they're not back to back, that wouldn't necessarily have that third difficulty of finding the perfect hotel. But I'm curious what the thought is now.
Great point, Dean Keller. And that's one thing I didn't highlight here. As Donna noted, CSBARS has a preview. I'll be presenting this same information at the CBE meeting, and you just highlighted something that I need to highlight here, and that is we would not be back to back. The idea is that we would administer the MB potentially on the day that we are required to. That was that Wednesday of the last week of July that has a Wednesday in it. So, the typical, we would start with the MB on that typical Wednesday. And then the following week, we would have the essays and PT. So they would not be back to back to accommodate the need that you just highlighted.
Thank you. That's good to know as we consider this. Thanks. Any other questions on this?
I just wanted to mention, if there's no other questions, that we did agendize just this topic for a special CBE meeting on June 28th. I sent a notice out to the lists I had for all the deans and administrators. So hopefully you got that from me, that it's not agendized for Friday's meeting. So we will be going deeper on these models for the CBE to vote on a recommendation for the July board meeting.
Yeah, just clarification. Yes, I was a little unclear. So on Friday, all the fees will be presented, but the next Wednesday is this cost reduction model? Is that
where they can actually have an action? So it's one of those timing public meeting law issues where they can't actually have an action about a model preference. The Committee of Bar Examiners can't take any action because it's not agendized. So we have to do a special meeting where they can actually say, our preference is 6 sites, no remote, or who knows what they're going to say, right? So we can't have them move a recommendation forward for the July board meeting Friday, but we'll do a high-level preview, just like we just did for you. And then the June 28th meeting will be an action recommendation for the July Board of Trustees.
Okay, but the Friday they could take action on all the fees on the revised.
Friday, it's not an action. It's also similar. It's a report. So the action of sending this other option out for public comment is already happening. They're just hearing. They're just hearing this third option that Donna presented, similarly to how we just did it in this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I see we're a little after 2:15, but I'm not sure if our 2:15.
I see him in the attendee pool.
Okay.
Yeah, he's here, he's ready. So we're going to be promoting the public trust liaison. And it'll take just a second for him to appear. Here we go. Enrique, we can see you when you're ready to turn on your camera.
All right, can you guys hear me? Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me and see me okay? It took me a second to jump in.
I can see.
Right.
Yes.
You're here.
Wonderful.
Hi, Enrique.
Thank you. Pardon, I was waiting to be promoted and the camera was lagging just a little bit. But I'd like to take this chance to introduce myself, tell you a little bit about my office. My name is Enrique Zúñiga. A little history about me. I've been working at the bar for over a decade. I actually started on what we used to call the complaint hotline, where the public could call in and get help on how to file complaints, how to file referral services. Essentially, it was a contact center. I worked there for a few years. Then I became a complaint analyst and then an investigator. Investigator 1, Investigator 2. I worked in the unauthorized practice of law division as well. And I eventually passed the bar exam and started working as a deputy trial counsel just under 2 years. I worked as a DTC for about 1 year and 11 months. And given that I have experience in multi-levels and I've seen complaints from inception all the way to trial, and I also went through the bar application, bar admission, bar exam process. I was selected to be the public trust liaison, and I'm very happy and honored to be here. a little bit about my office is confidential, and it's also independent and impartial. What that means is if somebody submits an inquiry to my office, I am no longer part of OCTC, which is Office of the Chief Child Counsel, and I am also no longer part of admissions. This independence enables me to evaluate inquiries, complaints, or any type of issues that the public is having with the state bar. It's also confidential, so statements that are said to me are not released. I do use data to report to the Board of Trustees, but first name, last names, and the instances are not going to be released. There's also a section of the Public Trust Liaison that's currently being developed, where it's a proactive approach to educate the public about how the discipline system works and about how admissions works and options. Currently, my focus is Office of the Chief Child Counsel and admissions. So what that means for us and our general topics that we're covering now is that if an applicant needs general guidance, has a general question, or perhaps they reached a roadblock and they don't know how to, for example, withdraw an application or how to get a partial refund in bar exam, they can actually submit an inquiry to my office, and I will personally assist them, point them in the right direction, talk to them about procedures, and assist them. At the moment, we are taking inquiries on the Office of the Chief Child Counsel side, which includes all the disciplinary actions and all the disciplinary procedures, and also admissions. So our office has been open for about 6 months, almost 7, and we were open during the February bar exam. So as you can imagine, right before the bar exam, my office was contacted heavily about people wanting to withdraw from the bar exam, knowing simple questions as, hey, can I take a bag with my lunch to the office? You know, things that might not be apparent at first glance, or maybe they have nerves, and my office was able to respond to those inquiries. Now, one of the things that helps define the office is what the Public Trust Liaison doesn't do, right? So the Public Trust Liaison, my office, we cannot actually draft complaints for the public. If a complaint comes in through my office, I can guide them, I can assist them. We provide ADA assistance, and we could even transcribe their complaint, but we won't actually be drafting those. We are obviously not legal representatives. We don't intervene in disciplinary processes or any admission process that's pending, such as something that might be before the Committee of Bar Examiners, or maybe a moral character fitness determination. We cannot intervene in that. We don't have the power to overturn or reverse or modify findings. For example, we don't have the power to overturn a moral character determination. However, we do have insight on steps, procedures, how to file appeals, etc., that might not be apparent on our website, or maybe they're not too clear, or people need clarification. Now, the final thing is the Public Trust Liaison. We don't have the power to make a binding decision or to mandate policies. However, I do have a direct dotted line relationship to the Board of Trustees. If in the process of an inquiry, something comes up that I need to report to the Board of Trustees, there will be an annual report that outlines things such as gaps in procedures, or maybe recommendations to move forward. And that's my office in a nutshell. The best way for the public to reach me is they can either contact, if they don't have access to our website, they can actually contact the contact center, and they can talk to public trust representatives right over the phone and assist them with simple matters that are available on our website. In the event that things need to get escalated, they can fill out one of my forms. It's in the landing page. It's very short, very simple. I just request contact information, the nature of the problem or issue, and how they wish to resolve it. and that comes to me directly. In the event that an applicant doesn't have access to the website or they're in the middle of a road trip, the public trust representatives can actually fill out those forms for them, which does happen often. So I like to consider myself as a independent intermediary between the public and the state bar. And our process, I know, are complex and could be intimidating. So this is the first time when there's somebody at the bar that can answer questions, that you can bounce off ideas, and I can point you in the right direction. So I know that's a mouthful, but now that you're aware of my office and what we do and what we can't do, if anybody has any questions or would like to ask me anything about procedures or about how to reach me, please.
Any questions from anyone? So yes, Dean Park.
I just had a quick comment. I think it's so great that you're doing what you're doing. I think it can definitely help a student who's stressed or trying to scramble for solutions. I was just wondering, because you mentioned the website and you mentioned other ways to reach out. Do you have something like a department inbox or different things that could be handy, for example, to mention to cohorts of students, for example?
Yes, actually, that's a great question. Before I leave, I will send the link to my landing page. My landing page actually has the form, and it can literally take somebody 1 minute to fill out. It's right now we're using HubSpot. If you're familiar with that forum, it's quite, it's quite easy to use. There also there is the hotline phone number, the contact center phone number, and I'll also provide it. If all else fails, if you were to Google State Bar and dial our general number, which is 213-765-1000, you would actually get routed to my contact center, and you would be able to speak to a PTR and elevate to an inquiry to me in the event that that's what you were trying to do. So in answer to your question, we do have a form. We have access over the internet. At one point, I was accepting inquiries through email, but due to the popularity of the office, and because emails tend to be kind of sparse in information, the preferred method is through the inquiry form. Now that's not to say I will ignore an email, but the preferred method is the inquiry form. I will provide that before I depart.
Thank you.
Anything
Yes,
else?
Natalie.
So this question is possibly for Enrique and maybe also Audrey. So if a student has a question, what's the best advice for them in terms of speed or completeness? They have options to use the FAQ on the website, questions through their applicant portal, to go directly to PTL. Are there times when it might feel comforting to be able to reach you live quickly, but it may be faster to use some of those other situations, or maybe there are other options? What's the best advice for students, and does it change sort of in the quick moments before the bar exam?
I don't want to step on Enrique's toes, but I think anything that we've hopefully tried so hard to put a lot of information out in our FAQs online. Obviously, we've posted things like the admittance ticket bulletin has been up now, since the bar exam opened, so you don't have to wait to see things that you might need to know about what you need to bring in or can't bring in. So we've tried really hard to be transparent, and we're sending the weekly emails starting again this Friday with the bar exam. So hopefully answering a lot of questions in advance. So there's not a short panic before the exam, for example. But barring that, I would say putting in a general request to the applicant portal for questions. We still have a really good turnaround in the office answering those. And then I'm not sure, yes, if someone really wants to talk to someone and even just that reassurance, of course, they're welcome to call in to talk to folks in Enrique's office. But yeah, I'd say any question that we can answer in advance is good, and then a general request, and then I'm sure a next line of a defense calling into the public trust representatives is also good. I don't know, Enrique, is that how you would answer it?
Yes, actually, from experience, I can tell you that applicants are very resourceful. What I often find is that they contact both at the same time. I found situations where I might have a question that comes into my office at 2:30 in the morning, and then 8 a.m. rolls around, and by the time I get to that person, maybe it's 9, 10 a.m. in the morning, they already have a response. They're like, hey, thanks for checking in, but I already figured this out. So I've noticed that applicants tend to go to different resources. Now, I actually encourage people to reach out to me. I have no problem with touching base with somebody and then telling me like, hey, this problem's already been resolved. That's not a problem for me. But I will tell you that the Office of Admissions, it's really fast. They're very quick to respond because sometimes by the time something is on my radar, they've already provided a response or vice versa. And I do have obviously have direct access to the people in admissions. So sometimes when an inquiry goes to them or it comes to me, we're both already kind of working on things to try to resolve the student's issue. One of the things that I will note is that perhaps I get a different type of applicant, or a different, I should say, applicant in different situations, because I've been approached by people that are considering law school. I've been approached by people that have taken the LSAT and they're about to apply. And I've also been approached by people that are in their first semester and they have very general questions. So sometimes there are no FAQs for the type of questions I'm getting, but I can point them to resources, or I can provide them to the right place at the State Bar's website, because as you can imagine, a new student might not be as familiar with State Bar website or their My State Bar profile as a 3L. So the best thing I think for an applicant is certainly reach out to me, reach out to the normal channels of communication, and somebody who's going to reach out back to them. And I certainly don't mind getting an inquiry, and by the time I reach out to them saying, hey, it's already been resolved, that's not a problem for me. And or to the event that they say, hey, I already spoke to admissions, can I tell you what I'm thinking? And that's fine too. You know, we can have a discussion and I'll point them to the resources.
Just following up on that, I think recently a lot of the questions that bubble up all to me from bar takers in particular always deal with testing accommodations, and what message would you like us to send in terms of what you can or can't do, or who they should be talking to about that? Yeah,
if anybody is interested in testing accommodations from my office, they likely would get procedures. I might point them to the right direction, how to file them, where to go, where to find these documents, or how to do the procedure, etc. Unfortunately, the determination of a testing accommodation is not going to be made by my office. But as you are aware, people that require test accommodations, at least my experience is, they don't always know how to go about making these requests. So that's where I can provide the bridge between admissions and the public. One of the things that's really popular when a prospective student is about to start law school, they'll reach out and ask general questions about just the admissions process. Like, hey, I've gotten questions about MPRE scores, what does California take? I've gotten general questions about moral character and fitness, things that perhaps an applicant is not comfortable speaking with their own law school or with admissions, but they feel comfortable speaking with me about it. To answer your testing accommodation question, if they were to reach out to me first, my procedure would be to inform them about the testing accommodation procedures and how to apply through the admissions process. But sometimes hearing it from me makes things a little bit easier, or essentially provide the customer service aspect that they can get from the website.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Natalie.
All the questions today. Also, I'd like to, and Enrique, correct me if I'm wrong, I'd like to highlight that the addition of a public trust liaison is an additional avenue, and it doesn't supplant the current avenues that we have. So we encourage you, our favorite issue is one that we have prevented. And so we really appreciate this forum, the public comment, the comments we get from the weekly emails about the types of your questions that you are getting in real time, the way that we deal with them through these meetings and also the annual law school meetings. So please do continue to keep that feedback loop open and strong so that we can try to get those first transparent communications that Audrey recognized right the first time, and easy for students and easy for you when you need them. And when Enrique can help, please utilize his office as well.
Yeah, and a lot of the questions that I get, frankly, are available on our website, but I think they see that I'm available. People have told me that they found me through LinkedIn and they'll reach out to my office. And sometimes they just have general questions about deadlines, how long things should take. I've received questions about timelines, just general questions like that. Like I said, before the bar exam, I had a few panicked emails of people that couldn't access their state bar profile, so they couldn't print their ticket. I had general questions of, am I allowed to take a backpack? What about a pillow? Things that are essentially on the bulletin, but people are concerned and they want to hear it from a state bar official. In those cases, I refer them to the website. We go over it together. I point them to the right direction, provide answers. Most of the time, when I have questions about deadlines, I'll answer the deadline and I'll actually send them a link to their email. So by the way, what we discussed is here for your future reference. And people seem to really appreciate that.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Like I said, it's my pleasure. I've been through the process. I've been on both sides, and I'm happy to help.
Thank you. All right, let's take a minute to go back to the first staff report on the agenda. Audrey, on the Blue Ribbon Commission.
Yes, and sorry, yes, we're definitely, this is good. It's a good thing, but we're probably not going to get to everything you had agendized today. But I will be go through these slides as quickly as possible. But of course, if you have questions, let me know. All right, so I wanted to give you an update on what happened with the Blue Ribbon Commission report at the May board meeting. So just to recap really quickly, so the Blue Ribbon Commission, as you know, was formed by the Supreme Court, the State Bar Board of Trustees. The commission met 19 times, both in the full commission and in subcommittees from 2021 to 2023, longer than it was anticipated. At its final meeting on April 26th, 2023, the Blue Ribbon Commission looked at kind of an aggregation of all the public comment. There were almost 900 folks making over 1,400 comments. So kind of collapsing into a dashboard, looking at things that kind of came up time and time again, and made some revisions, which I'll go over, that went in front of the Board of Trustees at their May 19th meeting. So the Blue Ribbon Commission recommended that California develop its own bar exam. There are the CAPA recommendations that were moved forward, which were the 8 legal topics. 7 of those are on the current exam: civil procedure, con law, contracts, criminal law and procedure, evidence, real property, torts. And then there's a different new topic called administrative law and procedure. And then after public comment, professional responsibility was added back in as a topic for the new bar exam. Also, a specification to make sure that everyone understood that a California developed exam does not mean that exam does not cover federal law. So there were some in the public comment, some misunderstanding about exactly what a California specific or California exam meant, but we will still be covering federal law in those topic areas where it makes sense to do so. So the Blue Ribbon Commission also adopted CAPA's recommendations on skills to be incorporated in the new exam: drafting, issue spotting, as you can see, negotiation. If you've been around since CAPA's recommendations have been around, then you've probably will recognize these skills. So if the Supreme Court does adopt the Blue Ribbon Commission's recommendations to develop this California exam, the State Bar of California will be able to engage subject matter experts in exam development and other specialists so we can start designing the new exam. The design shall be consistent with guiding principles adopted by the Blue Ribbon Commission, principles about how the exam should be fair, equitable. The exam should minimize disparate performance impacts based on race, gender, ethnicity, disability, and other immutable characteristics. The Blue Ribbon Commission also recommended that the exam, the focus of that exam is more on assessment of skills and application and not about memorization of doctrinal law, and the precise weight of content knowledge versus skills should be determined after the exam has commenced to be developed. And then the Blue Ribbon Commission recommends transparency on topics and rules to be tested. So something that was talked about a lot at that last April meeting and had a lot of public comment was, what was the Blue Ribbon Commission recommendation on reciprocity? So that was clarified in what was put forward to the board in May. So the recommendation from the Blue Ribbon Commission is that the Supreme Court revise the requirements for licensed out-of-state attorneys in good standing to be admitted to California without sitting for the California bar exam, that the licensing state provide the same privilege to California licensed attorneys, and as you can see, it's reciprocal, regardless of educational background. So regardless of how folks were licensed in California, ABA schools, Cal Accredited, registered through law office study, and that the minimum number of years of recent practice in another state to establish minimum competence, along with the demonstration of ethical and competent practice. So there's also a recommendation that any changes for foreign attorneys and foreign educated applicants be deferred until the new California bar exam has been implemented. All right, so something that was discussed in subcommittee and in the full commission with the Blue Ribbon Commission was a bar exam alternative. Part of the charter was to determine whether or not a bar exam was the best or only way to determine minimum competence. So considerations like how do you determine minimum competence in a bar exam alternative? How do you control for consistency across law school types and law office study? How would fairness and equity, back to those guiding principles, be implicated? How about affordability and access? How could you scale up an alternative pathway in California with so many applicants? And then could everyone apply to a bar exam alternative, or would it be some sort of smaller pilot group? So there were three main components that the Blue Ribbon Commission looked at in their meetings. What happens in law school? There are changes to the program of legal education in law school that's going to be regulated by the state bar, the supervised practice component. So practicing under a licensed attorney, and how many hours would that be? Could some of that happen in law school? And then an assessment piece. And so not a traditional bar exam, but how would minimum competence in a bar exam alternative be assessed? Would it be through work product review, a capstone project? Would there be mini exams, only performance test parts of a bar exam? Lots of things were discussed about these three components. And through it all, the Blue Ribbon Commission ultimately did not reach a consensus on even exploring a bar exam alternative. If you look at the report, all of the motions that were put forward about even trying to explore this option did not receive enough votes to move a recommendation forward to the Board of Trustees. So the board had the action of approving the other recommendations, the California Developed Exam covering federal law and California law, the CAPA topics that we talked about in a prior slide, plus adding back in professional responsibility, the CAPA recommended skills, focus on that skills and application versus doctrinal memorization. The state bar will be able to engage subject matter experts to develop the new exam, and then reciprocity for attorneys from other states, regardless of educational background. So those were the actions the board had in front of them. They did move forward the report and recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Commission to the Supreme Court. And then there was a very engaging and interesting conversation about the bar exam alternative and how the board wanted to see a proposal even though the Blue Ribbon Commission in its official capacity did not move a recommendation forward. So the Board of Trustees directed staff to gather the Blue Ribbon Commission members who indicated support for a bar exam alternative together and to get them started to develop a proposal so they could have something to look at either their July or September meeting. That timeline has been developed by staff to look at the September meeting, so they have enough time, this group, those who indicated support, to actually develop a proposal for the September meeting. Drawing on the principles of the Blue Ribbon Commission and the materials that we had over many of those meetings, that group can invite experts and other stakeholders to their meetings as they develop this proposal. And at the September 2023 Board of Trustees meeting, there will be a proposal for the board to look at from this group. So I will stop sharing that now. And that was something that was not, covered by the staff item or in the Blue Ribbon report, but did come out of the May board meeting. About now is this working group of those who supported a bar exam alternative writing a proposal to bring to the September board meeting.
Thank you. I have one quick question on clarification. So you had that slide that was like BOT, California Development, Kappa plus PR, Kappa Skills, all that. Was that, then that included true reciprocity. Was that actually adopted by the board?
To move forward to the Supreme Court. So again, we'll
Okay.
see what the court does with all of those recommendations. Of course, it would be their purview to take some, not others, change it, who knows what's going to come back. But there'll be a covering letter sent with those recommendations put forward to the Supreme Court.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, great. So let's move on. I think Natalie has a reminder on CSBARS applications as well as some other recent developments.
Sure, thanks very much. Okay, a couple of different things. The first one is to circle back to Friday's CBE meeting. For those who plan to attend in person, the agenda has been updated to provide you with the exact location of the meeting. So it'll be taking place at Loyola Marymount University's downtown law campus. So that is not the main campus out by Marina del Rey, but rather the one in downtown LA. It's going to be at 919 Albany Street, the Robinson Courtroom, which is room 102. That's already posted on the agenda. So if you access the agenda right now, you'll see that full information so that you can join in person if you would like to, and you can always join via Zoom as normal from any location as well. So that is one announcement. A couple of other things. We are in eligibility season. We've gotten a few questions more than we normally do. And so we just wanted to bring up some reminders, things I think that most folks know, but it doesn't ever hurt to reinforce important messages. The first one is we have been receiving more and more evaluations of study well after the study has taken place for various reasons. And it's important to consider if an evaluation is appropriate to do so prior to undertaking study. So for example, prior to a transfer or prior to a proposed change or prior to a change of status of a particular law school. That's the way that both the student and the school will have the most options and make sure they undertake the correct plan. So that is one thing that we have seen. The second one is to remember that all students are required to take and pass the first-year law students exam unless they establish an exemption. And if they establish an exemption through attending an accredited or an ABA approved school, they must not only complete the year, but be fully eligible to advance to the next year. So there shouldn't be other gatekeeping exams or various other things that they have not completed. They should not be academically disqualified at the end of the year. Those are circumstances where even attending an accredited or an ABA approved school will not establish the exemption for the student. And if there's any question about that, we encourage you to reach out to eligibility as soon as you have a concern about a student. The next one relates to Civil Code 1788.91, and this is the provision that requires that withholding of a transcript may not be used as a means of debt collection. And so a student may owe a balance, but they are still entitled to a transcript for any purpose they may need that, whether that be to transfer to another school, to submit to a prospective employer, etc. This is a relatively recent rule. It became effective in 2020, but it certainly is a statute that we all work under, so it's important to remember. And then finally, for registered fixed facility schools that have been using emergency pandemic waivers to teach their fixed facility classes online, those waivers, and fortunately the emergency portion of the COVID emergency are concluding. So they will conclude as of August 2023, and those schools should be prepared to either return to their fixed facility teaching modality, or if they've decided that they enjoy the distance learning category as Dean Leal's school has, they can apply for a major change to enter the distance category. That will require them to make some permanent changes to their curriculum, and if they are hoping to do that for the fall, they should immediately file those motions as soon as they can, certainly by the beginning of July, so that they can possibly be considered for August. Okay. So those were the announcements that I had under recent developments.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, so that brings us with 9 minutes left to our discussion items, none of which I think were include any action items for today. So that's fortunate. So we had the first item, which was brought back on discussion of best practices for preserving student transcripts when a law school closes. So just to sort of connect back to our prior discussion a couple of meetings ago, at that time, some of the CBE members had suggested consultation with the BPPE. So at our last meeting, I indicated we'd come back to the discussion after staff had a chance to do those consultations with the BPPE about best practices and whether there was a possibility of them hosting law school transcripts in connection with this item. Staff has indicated that they plan to follow up with BPPE after all of the CSBARS feedback is received. So I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to finish discussing a couple of those research items that we hadn't directly addressed, and also that folks had time to share any additional thoughts or concerns that they wanted to bring to the attention of the staff as they go back to BPPE or have further discussions. So we haven't really answered the sort of threshold questions that we had talked about in terms of the scope of the records or the modality of the records, whether we're talking about hard copy or digital or the entire history of the school or just going forward or somewhere in between. It seems like we're sort of in a chicken and egg situation there, and that difficult to answer those questions without figuring out how we're going to preserve the records, but it's also difficult to suggest how to preserve the records without knowing exactly what records we are trying to preserve. So we'll do our best to try to deal with that conundrum as we discuss a couple of the other questions that we had, one of which related to student registration and the other related to how feasible it might be for a law school to actually share copies of ongoing student records with the state bar on some sort of ongoing basis. So I know some of the deans had kindly volunteered to look at those questions. I would open the floor to anyone who wants to share some results with the rest of us, and we will, I suspect, not get through necessarily everything in 6 minutes, but we'll see what we can learn.
And Dean Keller, alternatively, if the group plans to hold for a more luxurious discussion, I can give a brief update on the demographic data.
Okay, if folks would prefer that alternative, Dean Leal, what say you?
Well, I would just like, again, to echo Dean Keller, your comment. I don't think we can have a meaningful discussion, let alone a decision with regard to these issues until and unless, as you've indicated, we know what we're talking about. And, for staff to then define what records we're referring to. And I think in our prior meeting, we discussed the obvious necessity of preserving transcripts. And that would be, I think, the core document that students and graduates would sometime down the road when a school closes, that's what they're interested in, not the vast majority what might be in their student files. But we don't know that until we get a better understanding or definition from staff. So I would ask politely again that definition be provided, and then I think we can go forward.
And just to recap, we've been talking about historically transcripts, and so that students can get official transcripts. And actually, we would be looking for a recommendation from the schools of the sorts of documents that you keep that could be important to students over time, not only at the moment that they graduate, but in future years, particularly understanding that some of your students may choose not to take the bar exam for quite some time.
Well, perhaps the best use of the last 3 minutes of today's meeting would be a quick discussion and input from the members here. I could tell you in the almost 5 years I've been dean of my school, I can honestly say there's never been a single request from any student or graduate for anything other than their transcripts. They haven't had the need for, interest in, or have made a request for anything other than transcripts for all the obvious reasons that the transcripts, what they. And I don't know if other deans would experience would be similar to mine, but it might be a good question to poll people at this point. Again, if we limit it just to transcripts.
Yeah, am I one of the few who you have to go to student records, or my registrar, I should say, for various moral character requests, whether California or other states, to see whether they had particular ethics issues. Sometimes it's even a request for an admissions application, but I also can't imagine scanning all of those so that they can be digitally stored off-site somewhere if we're thinking about in terms of feasibility. Yes, Dean Marshall.
Yeah, I want to second that point. In addition to the transcript, then I would ask us as kind of a body of institutions, do we have an obligation to the public to archive and store exactly the moral character stuff that might be in a student file? And so back to the original statement or question is, so what do we mean by student records? And I think we do need to define that to have a better understanding than to the rest of the questions, because as Dean Leal and I had talked, what do we mean by sharing the records with the state bar on an ongoing basis? And I would then say that raises the point of frequency. Is this every semester? Is it every year? And then again, all that ties into the magnitude of the records that we're going to store and share. So I think that's the starting point. That would be really helpful to us all to properly assess then those subsequent staged questions about transaction costs, administrative costs, and financial costs, and who's to bear them and collect them.
If I could add,
Further.
if I just, yes, Dean Marshall and I met yesterday to discuss this, and as to our topic number 5, the only question we would follow up with is sort of the why. What's the intent behind it? Because it sounds like there's some desire by staff to literally turn the state bar into satellite offices of all our registrar's offices. If we are regularly on a quarterly, semester, annual basis submitting a series of student records to the state bar, the question is why and what's the need, and is the state bar willing to manage, organize, and maintain those records? So, you know, if there's, I don't know, we've had any discussion as to the thought behind or the intent to, regarding question number 5.
Dean Keller, I do believe we are at time.
Yes, you are correct. I think that certainly, you know, tees up a good spot for us to continue the discussion next time. If it doesn't violate our rules of order, I would give Dean Clancy the opportunity to add his comments.
Do you wish to have me do that now, or are you saying next time, maybe at the top? Now, I don't mind now, and I can condense what I have to say very quickly.
Yes, why don't you do that, and we can just add that to things to think about for next time.
I just wanted to offer an opinion here, and that is that I think it would be an enormous burden if the schools were required to keep anything more than transcripts in perpetuity as we go forward, especially for a school that's closing. A school that's closing won't find it feasible at all to pay for everything to be copied or everything to be saved in a storage area into the future, year after year. Regarding Dean Leal's comment about not having had even one request for anything from records in the time that he's been there, that matches my experience over the past many years. I can think of one instance when someone asked us to check a record because they thought that the grades reported on their transcript were incorrect. We did pull the file. We've got all of our files for 41 years of existence, have them in storage, pulled the file, the grades were correct, the transcript was accurate. It seems to me that that's what should be required, that the schools keep transcripts in perpetuity going forward and no more. I think that as to the other records, we ought to try to harmonize with the BPPE. The BPPE requires that schools keep 5 years of records, or in other words, keep records for 5 years and transcripts forever. I think that would work for us.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for indulging our 2 minutes over our typical time. And thank you everyone for being here. We'll have a couple of discussion items teed up for next time, and we will see you then. Right, thank you very much. Thank you.